All right, let's get real for a second. Are you still manually copy-pasting IDs from one API request to the next? If you are, hey, you're not alone, but there is a much, much smarter way to work. Today, we're jumping into request chaining. This is the one technique that will make your tests stronger, more realistic, and actually able to handle complex business logic. So, let's get into it.
So let's start with a scene that I'm sure is painfully familiar to a lot of you. You kick off your big automation run, you go grab a coffee, and you come back to a sea of red. Everything failed. Not because the application is broken. Oh no, it's because one single hard-coded ID expired or got deleted. It is so frustrating, a total waste of time, and it makes your tests feel incredibly fragile.
And this really gets us to the core of the issue, right? It's the old manual way versus the smart dynamic way. The manual way is a nightmare of hunting down data and constantly updating your scripts. Your tests are basically built on a house of cards. But the dynamic way, which is powered by request chaining, is all about letting your tests pass data along automatically, creating these resilient workflows that act like a real user.
To really wrap our heads around this, let's use an analogy. I want you to stop thinking of your test as a bunch of separate events. Instead, think of it like a high-stakes relay race. In this race, that first API request, maybe it's creating a user, it generates the baton. That baton could be a new user ID, an auth token, you name it. Then, it has to pass that baton, that data, perfectly to the next runner, the next request. If that handoff fails, if that baton gets dropped, the whole thing just grinds to a halt. It's the perfect way to think about these dependencies.
So let's put a formal definition on it. Request chaining is simply the technique of linking your API requests together in a sequence. You take data from the response of one call and then you use it or inject it as an input for the very next call. It's literally the glue that holds your complex, multi-step scenarios together.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. Okay, this sounds complicated, but trust me, it's way more straightforward than it sounds. Once you break it down, it's just a logical, repeatable pattern. So let's walk through the 5-step blueprint for building these things right. You see, it's a pretty simple flow. First, you just identify what the second call needs from the first one. Then, you run that initial request. Step 3, and this is where the magic happens, you parse the response and you grab that dynamic piece of data. Then, you just use that data to build your next request, send it off, and finally, verify that the whole workflow did what it was supposed to do. It's a clear path every single time. All right, enough theory? Theory's great, but seeing it in action is what really makes it click. Let's look at a couple of quick examples in some really popular tools, and we'll start with Rest Assured. Okay, here is a classic, and I mean absolutely critical use case, getting an auth token. In this Rest Assured code, that first request hits a token endpoint. We get a response back, and then we use this handy JSON path method to dive into the JSON and pull out the access token. That token then gets stored in a variable, and boom, it's immediately put into the authorization header for the next request. Zero hard coding, just a clean, automated flow. Now let's check out Postman, where this is just as slick. Here, we're testing a create then read workflow. The first request is a post that creates a new user. Then in the tests tab for that request, we run this little bit of JavaScript. This pm.globals.set function just grabs the ID from the response body and saves it as a variable. After that, in our second request, we just use Postman's variable syntax, those double curly braces, to pop that ID right into the URL. So simple, but so powerful. And this, right here, brings us to the #1 rookie mistake. And listen, everyone does this when they start out, so don't feel bad. You grab an ID from the database, you hard-code it into your test, and then you're scratching your head a week later wondering why it's failing. We've all been there. Just learning to spot what should be dynamic is half the battle. So, to help you sidestep those common issues, let's go over a few traps and some pro tips. And this is the kind of stuff that really separates the beginners from the top-tier automation pros. First up, the mistakes to avoid. Obviously, getting your calls in the wrong order, like trying to get a user before you've created them. We've hammered on hard coding, but also be careful with your parsing logic. If your JSON path is too specific, one tiny API change can break everything. And finally, remember that change tests create dependencies, so you have to be smart about managing state and keeping tests isolated from each other. Now for the good stuff, the insider tips. #1, always model real-world user journeys. Think login, add to cart, checkout. That's where you'll find the real business value. #2, always design for cleanup. If your test creates data, it should delete that data. It's just good housekeeping. For super complex workflows, code-first frameworks will give you more power. And finally, use your tool's built-in variable management. It'll save you so many headaches. Okay, we've covered a ton of ground here, so let's boil this all down to a simple 3-part master plan that you can walk away with and start using right now. Look, when it comes right down to it, this is what you need to remember. 3 core principles. First, simulate. Your goal is to test real user journeys, not just poke at single endpoints. Second, mechanism. Get that core workflow down cold. Execute, parse, inject. And third, validate. This is your go-to technique for testing critical things like security flows and full data lifecycles. And I want to leave you with this. This is not just another testing trick. It's a fundamental shift in how you build automation. You stop writing fragile scripts that are a pain to maintain, and you start creating robust, realistic scenarios that provide real business value. Master this, and I promise you, you are putting yourself way ahead of the curve. You're elevating your entire game as an automation engineer.